Hi, Peter Charles here of Hooked for Life Fly Fishing, and welcome to my video on my 4 most favorite trout flies. 1 streamer, 1 wet fly, 1 nymph, and 1 dry fly. And I'll explain what it is I like about these particular flies. And I'm going to start off with the streamer first, because for years I put most of my effort into streamers. I mean, I did fish the other methods, especially wet flies, but my key love was streamers. And I'll bring up some honorable mentions. I mean, I caught a lot of fish on Mickey fins, both bass and trout. Woolly buggers, of course, caught tons of fish on woolly buggers. But probably the first streamer that I really did well with, that we typically think of a bucktail or a streamer, was the little brown trout. And my friend gave me 2 or 3 of them, and I fished them for years until the hooks rusted away and the points rusted off. I mean, I used those little brown trout flies for years, and I caught a ton of fish on them. But the main producer, the one that has caught the most fish for me, especially the most big trout, has been the brown trout weimer. That's a fly of my own design, and it fishes in so many different ways. Dead drift. I've caught fish dead drifting the thing. It looks like a dying minnow going along the bottom of the river. I've caught fish swinging it. I've caught fish stripping it. I've caught fish, swinging it high, swinging it low, in salt water and in fresh. It's caught fish and under all sorts of conditions. So my number 1 favorite streamer is my brown trout weimer. It is simply the most effective streamer I have ever used. I mean, I've got all these other lovely streamers here, but the brown trout weimer does the job for me. And it's been a phenomenally good pattern over the years. But my second love was wet flies. And particularly wet flies like the partridge and orange, grouse and green, orange fishhawk. I loved fishing those flies. But, I've got a bunch of them here. But the one that I got the most results out of was my diving caddis pattern. Again, one of my own patterns. It imitates the Hydropsyche species female that dives under the water to lay her eggs. It also does a good job of imitating caddis that emerge lower down from the pupal state into adults, then swim up. So you've got 2 areas of the caddis life cycle covered, the egg laying and the emergence. So it's been a very effective fly for me over the years, and I've caught a ton of trout on it. I've had 30 fish days with the diving caddis, and I've caught brook trout on it, brown trout, and rainbow trout. So the whole gamut. Though I've never been known much as a nymph fisherman, as you can see by this box, I am fishing nymphs more and more and more over the years. And probably the one that got the most usage in the early days was the gold rib hare's ear. I use that probably more than any other type. I did use a smattering of other flies like the Hendrickson nymph and so on. I occasionally stoneflies, black stoneflies. But the one nymph that has been a consistent performer for me has been the pheasant tail. And I've done it in all sorts of variants. And lately I've been using it more as a Eurotype nymph with a bead, tungsten bead, some lead on it. And I've done very, very well. It's a consistent producer, and I've gone from little tiny ones that are on size 20 hooks all the way out to like size 10, and they just continually produce and catch fish. So my number 1 nymph is always going to be the pheasant tail, no matter what. I don't tie it like Frank Sawyer does. I'm likely to put peacock herl for a thorax sometimes. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Lots of variations, sometimes tied with a leg, sometimes without. But it's still the basic pheasant tail, and that catches fish for me. Lastly, we're going to talk about my dry fly choices. And I've not gone after mayflies that much. I don't include mayflies in my favorites. I guess it's because the period of time when mayflies are available for us to fish as duns, it can be so short. I mean, when you go out in my local river, I might have a 1 to 2 week window where, let's say Hendricksons are available, and then there's a one or two week on either side of that where they're in small numbers. So, you know, if you can say, well, Hendrickson or sulfurs, I say, suppose if I picked a mayfly dun pattern that I liked, it was the sulfur. And I probably fish that more than most. But the one consistent producer I've had over the years has been the Kings River Caddis style of caddis fly, because caddis flies are available over quite a period of time of the spring and summer. So we can continue to fish these patterns. And what I've done is, these are all Kings River Caddis here, but I've tied the same style with different coloring for different species of caddis. For honorable mentions has been the elk hair caddis. As you can see, I've got some here. I'll fish elk hairs quite a bit, but you know, the Kings River caddis has been the #1 producer for me in dry flies. And I probably fish that style of fly more than all the other dry flies put together, because I can go out there anywhere the last week of April all the way into July, and I'll still be catching fish on that fly. So that's basically my choices. I have caught loads of fish on other styles of flies. But if I'm going to, you know, if you ask me to go out with 4 flies, a streamer, a nymph, a wet fly, and a dry fly, it would be my brown trout weimer, the pheasant tail, the diving caddis, and the Kings River caddis. And I could fish trout for the rest of my life with just those flies in my fly box. So those are my 4 favorite patterns. And if you've never tried these flies before, give them a try. I've got how-to tying instructions up on YouTube. Have a look at them because they work extremely well. Cheers.